Hello, I wanted to talk to you about gender and property rights in Morocco, or property land rights in Morocco. These rights have been in the national debate since at least 2002 in Morocco, and now there is the emergence of a movement by women called the Sulaliyat movement to fight for their land rights. And of course, a lot of people have studied this problem, including Yasmin Barrayan in her article, and others like Said Sadi and many others who talked about the Sulaliyat movement and the land rights in Morocco. And Barrayan, for example, did a field work in Mehdia in Morocco and in Meknes and studied communities there that had issues of land rights. But in general, this issue has not been really studied a lot by many scholars. But we can say that in general, there is unequal access to land rights or to land property in countries like Morocco and also in other countries. So, for example, according to the Islamic law or the Sharia law, the inheritance is unequal in Islam. So, women inherit only half of what a man can inherit. And also, there is this unjust patriarchal law called the Urf, which generally favors men over women. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, before we start, let me talk a little bit about the different types of land property in Morocco. So you have the private property called milk in Arabic, and you have state-owned property, and about 67% of the land in Morocco is privately owned. And then you have the Habous property, which is owned by the Ministry of Religious Affairs, and the ministry has these lands which were donated by people in the past. And of course, there is, the Guiche property land, which also this land or Guiche is a land that was, given by the Makhzen to different communities to reward them for their help in wars. And of course, collective property in general includes other issues, including al-jumur, or land or collective property, which belongs to different tribes and communities all over the country. Here are some specificities. About 1.5 million hectares of Moroccan land are collective land. Okay? And after years of protests by these women called the Soulalia, the state has recently passed laws granting the right to benefit from collective land properties. And as I told you before, women were in the past excluded from inheriting these collective lands, and the right to access collective land was reserved to men because men were considered as the head of the families. And of course, the Urf also, as a customary law, emphasized this tradition, which meant that women did not inherit at all in the collective land. But of course, the Urf itself was a little bit complicated because it did not explicitly exclude women from inheritance. It only said that the exploitation of the collective land was reserved to men or to the head of the family. But the head of the family is, in general, a married man or a man married for at least 6 months. And women were de facto excluded from having access to collective land. What is the situation today? Well, the situation today is a bit different. Women are still excluded from various community lands until very recently. For example, near Meknes, there is a community called Ulad Ruhu, where women inherit a third of the olive trees that belong to their fathers, traditionally according to the Urf. But in Mahdiya, near Mahdawa tribe, women get the share of her son. Gets the share of her son if her son is still a minor, otherwise she gets nothing. So a woman can benefit only indirectly through her son or her family member, male family member, if there is agreement. And this depends also on the goodwill of the other members of the community. So the exclusion of women became known after some of these lands became part of the urban space and became so expensive and became therefore commodified. So this issue came to the media, to the fore in 2007 when the collective land became commodified. And between 2002 and 2003, the land developed, grew up in value because a lot of land developers were interested in it and started buying this collective land, especially near Meknes and Mehdia. And the beneficiaries, who were all men, received money, but also 2 plots of land each, and women were excluded. But in 2016, there were disputes between men and women over the property's rights. And of course, women in Meknes and in Mehdia began protesting since then. And they got the support of the civil society, especially of women's organizations like the Association Démocratique des Femmes du Maroc. And of course, in 2009, 6 women and other women from the Sulaliyat movement had recourse to administrative courts in Rabat and elsewhere. And of course, we can say that the Sulaliyat movement is a feminist movement, but it's different from the elite urban-based feminist movement, because this is basically a rural movement, and it's a movement specifically for women's inheritance land rights. And of course, since then, the state, tried to interfere and make some reforms through circulars of the Ministry of Interior, which were addressed to governors and walis about collective land. And the Ministry of Interior, of course, tried to address the gap, between the progress made by women on one hand, especially after the reform of the Mudawwana, and also the old customs and patriarchal system, which still persisted and excluded a lot of these women from their collective lands. But the interesting thing is that the religious scholars in Morocco, the ulama, supported the Sulaliyat movement and said the exclusion of women was contrary to Sharia. And of course, the Mahdawa community and also the community in Meknes and the Sulaliyat movement reacted in favor of these new laws and circulars by the Ministry of Interior. And the process of exclusion or of inclusion of women, the process of inclusion of women began since 2016, and then women, began demanding full share of the collective land, and the local authorities became little by little in favor of those reforms, because it was argued that economically including women was also a beneficiary, and women see the agreed reforms as positive. So as a result, 86,000 women received compensations of a total of 350 million dirhams between 2011 and 2013. And these compensations were very helpful for a lot of these women who had so many children and family members. So I would like to conclude by saying that major gender based changes have occurred in Morocco lately in the property rights in favor of women. And this is thanks to the Sulaliyat movement activism, but also thanks to the positive attitude of the state. And the commodification of the collective land made the inequalities visible and led to the politicization of the Sulaliyat movement. But as I said, the Minister of Interior had responded, favorably, condemning the gender-based injustice and introducing new reforms and new regulations which, were fair to these women. And official discourse also was favorable because it dismissed customary law as being incompatible with modern Morocco. And even local leaders were in favor of the change, claiming that Urf is in fact flexible in nature. So we are witnessing a shift in the legislation about women in Morocco, and today many women are in decision-making positions. We have over 34,000 women who were elected to the local councils in 2015, and now we have 67 women members of parliament, and so on and so forth. And this, property rights reform was even hailed by Ivanka Trump, who came to Morocco at the end of 2019 and spoke very favorably of these reforms that have taken place in Morocco in favor of the Sulaliyat and in favor of women's rights in general. Thank you.